So I figured all the other 39 guys went out another way, because I didn't understand the temple. So the next morning at around 3:30 or 4, I got up again, and I went in. This time I peeked. And there was this one guy. So, in one corner was a huge drum, and in another corner was a cymbal, and somewhere else were bells. And he was working with the echoes of this building. And he was just walking around chanting to different walls and different ceilings. And you knew he had been doing this like for maybe 30, 40 years. Every night, in the middle of the night. And it was that kind of music. I was meditating in the temple, and I was doing the rising, falling. See, if you went into the temple in Ceylon, they'd say, come this way, and they'd take you in a room, and they'd say, you sit right here on this mat. And they'd say, please notice that right in the middle of below your rib cage, when you breathe, certain muscles move. So you breathe, and you see that certain muscles move. And they say, when the muscle moves, follow it. So you follow it, it goes out, and then it goes down. And it goes out, and it goes down. There are a lot of muscles in there, but one of them goes out when you breathe in, and it goes down when you breathe out, or out and in. And that one you tune in on, and every time it goes up, you think rising. And every time it goes down, you think falling. And the man says, you understand? And you say, yes. He says, thank you, and he leaves. You came all the way to Ceylon, you see. And you've joyously been accepted into a temple. And you've been put in a room, and you've been told to watch this muscle go up and down, right? And the door's been closed, and that's it. Right? Every day your food's left outside the door. Everybody smiles at you when they see you. Okay. Now what? Do you get enlightened? Well, I'll tell you what happened in my part of this journey. That I sat in the temple and I did rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling. And I would go deep into it, and I would get into waves of bliss, and then a thought would come up. A thought form. And the thought forms, some of them at first were very agitated little thought forms, like your knee hurts. Or maybe you ought to have another cup of tea before you begin. Or, do you think the mail's here yet? Or, these damn flies. Whatever it is, one of those little ones. Thought forms. See? Most of them don't capture your consciousness after a while because you're used to them, and they're like demons that you had visit before, and you're welcome, sit over there, it's cool. Have some tea, biscuits. We're all here, it's groovy. And you go on doing your thing, rising, falling. They don't want to interrupt you, really. They just want to create a little hassle. They just want to be known that they're present. And you honor them. You don't try to stop them. You don't say, get out, I'm busy meditating. Sure, you got a pain in your knee? Come on in. Might as well anyway, it's going to come in. What do you want to And then I'd have some of these thoughts like, I wonder what I'll do back in the United States. Now those I couldn't dismiss so easily. Those would fascinate me, see. And I'm just sitting there hanging out. One of the hippies in Kathmandu said to me that meditation passes the time to lunch. And I was passing the time to lunch, and it was a good thing to think about. What do you do back in America? Once I was thinking about that, and in that afternoon, or I think it was that afternoon, maybe the next morning, I got a message that Maharaji wanted to see me. And I went over to see Maharaji, and I came to him, and he said, you were in America last night. It's like, who do you think you're kidding? You can leave your body around, but who do you think you're fooling? We know where you are. You're in America. So after a while, when you're just doing this kind of idiot's delight, this rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling, and you go through everything you can say to yourself, like, I've got a whole routine of these now. You say, because they've blown my mind so many. I run through them all, I think. Things like, for this you got a PhD. Rising, falling, rising, See, it is a stand-up comic routine. Is anybody going to match? Maharaji once said to me in India, he said, called me over and he whispered in my ear, "You make many people laugh in America." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's good." See? It's a 2-in-1 trip. After about 2 weeks, the guy comes back and he says, "How you doing?" You say, "Doing with what?" And he understands that you haven't yet heard the first message. So he says, "Well, I'll tell you, did you notice that right below your rib cage, there are these little muscles?" He's very patient in his whatever accent it is he speaks with. And he takes you through the thing. You're a Westerner after all. You got to understand. You think you got to do something. Now, all that exercise does, when you do it, by the way, is it helps you burn away all the places you aren't. It helps you burn away all your desires and your attachments by noting them, bringing them into consciousness. Because what you do is you focus on one thing, which could be your breath going in and out. It could be a point of a candle flame, like 2 hands away from your eyebrow, out at the point equal at the height of your ajna is a good place for it. And you just sit and hang out with a candle. And there's the candle and there's you, and you're just hanging out together. You're not saying, "I am going to see Christ in the candle," or "Light become me," or you can do all those. Those are other tricks. But the simplest one, this one of one-pointedness, is you just hang out with a candle. There's you and the candle, and then there's all these thoughts. Did you ever see in the spring, and I know in New Hampshire it's certainly very clear, the spring, all those tiny little bugs that hang around lights, millions of them? Well, those are like your thoughts. There's you and the candle and all these thoughts. But because you've got the candle as a focal point, you see the thoughts as thoughts rather than going on each one's trip. Because if you don't have any focal point at all, every time there's another stimulation, you'll just go off on that trip. And then you are at the whim of your senses and you're at the whim of your thoughts. That's like everybody's trip every day, all through life, most of the time. That's totally in the illusion. The other end of that scale, of course, is where there's nobody there and then you're responding to every stimulus. That's when you finish. That's the no-mind state. But where you still are attached, addicted to your rational mind, the game is to bring it down to one point. And then just hold one point and then watch everything else do its dance. All the feelings, all the body sensations, all the thoughts just going by like so much hamburger. I've got to save the world. I'm sick. Go do more hatha yoga, whatever your trip is. You see it, there's another trip. You see your own desires. You see yourself creating thought forms. And you dig that thought forms determine what you see around you all the time. I mean, I was looking out here before and I saw two huge eyes of my guru. You know, nose coming down. I was sort of standing right on the tip of the nose, looking into these two big eyes, thinking, wow, man, you've come at last. Which level do you want? You want to focus in on the cells? Or you want to see the organism, which the cells are part? And you focus on one point and you just stay on that point, and everything just keeps drifting by until there is only that point. Now that is the farthest you can go in dualism. It's one-pointedness. There's you seeing one point. That's on this side of the doorway. It's all within the illusion in Buddhist terms. It doesn't exist. Nothing's happened yet. Of course, in Buddhist, nothing's ever going to happen either. But nothing's happened yet. I mean, And at that point, the game gets very interesting. Because at that point, the point is to give up the place you've just been standing. The highest meditation in that direction is done by Ramana Maharshi, is given by Ramana Maharshi. And it's called Vichara Atma, the method of self-inquiry, or who am I? It's an absolute fierce, no-nonsense method of taking you gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi swaha, taking you beyond the ocean of existence. And all you need to be able to do is be totally one-pointed. Because if you can't be one-pointed in mind, you can't do any method in yoga. Hatha yoga is a joke without one-pointedness of mind. Certainly bhakti, devotion, how can you sing love songs to somebody and at the same time be wondering what time you're going to go home? I mean, bhakti is totally one-pointed. It's just your beloved. That's the whole idea of bhakti yoga. So dhyan yoga, the yoga of meditation, the highest method you can use, work assuming that you are so totally committed to doing what you're about to do that you can do it. Because there's nothing else to do, because there aren't any attachments to pull you away anymore. So what Ramana Maharshi suggests is you sit down and you put the I, your I, or you can make it EYE even. Put it right in the middle of your head. And then you say, I am not this form, body. And you experience the form as object and the I as subject. And then you break down the parts of the body and you do this. You say, I am not the 5 organs of motion. Arms, I am not the arms. And you experience your arm and you see it as an object. See it doing its thing. You see how the wrist works and the fingers. And wow, look at that. It's an exquisite mechanism. It can do fantastic things, you know. Prehensile, you get awed by the prehensile trip, you know, that we got on a while back. I'm not the arms. I'm not the legs. I'm not the tongue. And you do your tongue, and you see your tongue from I, and see I's here and the tongue's there. Arms, I am not the arms. And you experience your arm, and you see it as an object. See it doing its thing. You see how the wrist works and the fingers. And wow, look at that. It's an exquisite mechanism. It can do fantastic things, you know. Prehensile, you get awed by the prehensile trip, you know, that we got on a while back. I'm not the arms. I'm not the legs. I'm not the tongue. And you do your tongue, and you see your tongue from eye, and see eyes here and the tongue's there. I am not the anal sphincter. It's the fourth organ of motion. You feel your anal sphincter tightening and loosening, and you see it there doing its thing, and the eye is in the middle of your head. Fifth one is I am not my genitals. And that takes many people on a number of side trips with a number of demons dropping by. You experience your genitals, and you experience it from the eye in the middle of your head, and you see it as object. Then he says, you say, I am not my 5 organs of sense. Now you listen to your ears hearing. See? You note your ears hearing. Don't identify with your ears hearing, just note them hearing. Note your eyes seeing. Note your nose smelling. Note your tongue tasting. Note your skin feeling. I am not any of those. See, they're just doing their thing in nature. And that isn't who I am either. I'm right back here. I know where I am. Then you say, I'm not the 5 internal organs. I'm not digestion, and you experience the stomach digesting. I am not excretion, and you experience the intestines. I am not respiration, breathing. Circulation, blood. Perspiration, sweat. Each of these systems, you note it in your body, bring it to consciousness, see it as object, and stay in the eye in the middle of your head. And there's one more. See, the system is, I am not this body, 1, then 5, 5, 5, then 1. Now you're ready for the 1. You're down to the place where you've gotten rid of everything else, and all there is the eye in the middle of your head. And then you say, I am not the thought of I. I am not this thought. Which thought am I not? I am not the thought, I am not the thought. Oh, you're not that? Oh, you're not that? You're not that either. You're not that either. You've got the leverage on the system. See, every thought you think, you're not that one either. Every place you try to stand, you can't stand there either. What you've done is you put yourself out on the farthest branch and you just cut off the branch. And you see your own thoughts going by like news flashes on the Times building. I am not this thought. No, not that either. You see your thoughts going by like news flashes on the Times building. That's the way you should be seeing this whole scene now going down, by the way. Just as stuff happening. You don't have to collect it, it's just stuff happening. And that's what takes you through the doorway. That's what takes you from dualism to non-dualism. Because at that point you give up the experiencer, you give up the knower who knows. See, God doesn't sit around saying, hey man, I'm God. He just is God. He just is a consciousness. He just is manifesting. He's not laying it on anybody, it just is that. That's why it's reasonable to say that higher consciousness is exactly the distance from you of your next thought. See, if you think you're going to go to India to find a guru, you're going to be thinking in India just like you're thinking here. And sooner or later, somebody's going to put you in a room, see, and tell you to bring your mind to one-pointedness, and they're going to leave you there till you do it. And the person that's going to do it to yourself is you. Because you dig that your out-of-control mind is just running the show all the time. so that the whole process of bringing your mind to one-pointedness becomes a central matter. Now, the people that say bhakti is the only way in the Kali Yuga are saying, in order to bring your mind to one-pointedness, use the heart, use emotions, use love. Love is a way to generate the energy to override all the other demons and get you to one-pointedness. And they say Dhyan yoga, or the yoga of mind beating mind. The Western mind can't work with it because it's he'll be too cute. He'll undermine it every time. Only the Westerner's heart is strong enough to override the control of the ego. When you go to try to develop the witness in yourself, the guy who sees or the gal who sees it all going down every day, all the time, that's another part of, it's like in the Gurdjieff system, self-remembering. That's also in the rational mind on this side of the doorway. See? It's part of your rational mind that's digging the rest of your rational mind. But what happens is that witness wakes up for 1 second and then the ego takes over the witness. If you want a whole catalog of the way that's done, read St. John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul. It's got a whole list of them. It's got the groovy one where you've just done pranayama and you've just come into high light, see? You've just transcended your ego. And the ego pitters around behind you and pats you on the back and says, pretty good. And you realize you have an adversary that you hadn't bargained on, you know. Because everywhere you are, the ego's close behind. It's like Mary's little lamb. It's like your shadow. Did you ever try to beat your shadow? The ego's exquisite at taking over any game you can conceive in form, of course. It can make itself in any form. That's who your adversary is. How are you going to stab the enemy when the knife you're going to use to stab him is the enemy? And the arm you're stabbing it with is the enemy. And the thought you're desiring to stab the enemy is the enemy. Gets very heady. Krishna says in the Gita, he who thinks there is a slain or a slayer, or one who is slain, knows not me. There are so many ways that we can identify in a dualistic framework, in a devotional way, in a very high way, and get stuck. Get stuck at the most exquisite causal planes. And that's what I dug was the problem with the Holy Man trip, that it tended to play into the desire of people to create dualism. Paul Farmer, who's been traveling with me, said to me, man, what you create is a feeling in people that you're somewhere they're not. And I said, well, that's their problem. That is the problem of he of us who is them. That's our uncooked karma that we're still looking for it out there. Because as I've said before, it must be obvious to everybody that everything I'm saying you already know. All we are doing is reciting it to one another. We're talking to ourselves. All I am is the mouthpiece for us at this moment. And I'm saying what we have to say to ourselves, what I have to say to myself. Since there's only us, I guess we all have to say it to ourselves or we wouldn't be here. Tonight we're going to attempt an exercise in one-pointedness. About 3 years ago, I was in Berkeley. I was studying for the summer with Ali Akbar Khan, with Mahapurush Mishra, the tabla, at the Berkeley summer school, Ali Akbar Khan School. And while I was there, I was one day driving. I had an old school bus, and I was driving it across the the San Mateo Bridge. And I picked up a hitchhiker, and we grooved together for a while. And then he asked if he could bring a friend over, and he came to visit one day, and we hung out for a number of hours talking. And at the end of that time, the friend said that he played the guitar and he'd like to play for me sometime, and I thought, well, that's nice. But I think I'm finished with music. Because I'm at the predicament now where when I take my earplugs and stick them in my ears and go inside, I hear the sounds of the universe. I start to hear Om, and I start to hear choruses, and I start to hear flutes, and I start to hear, but they're divine. And I begin to realize what a gross form it is coming in through my senses. I mean, it's groovy the way music is, but it's still stuff, and behind the stuff, you start to get into this divine sound. And one of the highest yogas is what's called Shabd Yoga, also called Nad Yoga, which is the yoga of inner sounds. And you can just put in earplugs, or do the Vaishnava mudra, or something like that. Close off your ears and just start to listen to your inner sounds. And there are 9 of them. My teacher wrote in his slate, the 9th one is the sound of thunder. After that, you will have a fever for 24 hours. I mean, they know, man. They right down to the edge. And then he put a footnote. He says, the sound, he had listed them, and when he came opposite the flute, he had put an asterisk, and he put a note down. He said, the flute is so beautiful, it is like a deer being caught in a trap. You can't go on, because the flute's so beautiful. He says, after a few days, with much abhyas, practice, you can get on with it. In other words, groove with it for a little while and get on. He's pointing out where you might trip, along the way to help you. That was the inner sound. So when this fellow offered to play the guitar, I sort of, well, that's groovy, but man, that's not my trip. And as I was getting ready to go to India, I was visiting a fellow in Berkeley, and he said, I'd like you to hear this tape. And he put on a tape of guitar. And it was a very beautiful thing, and it was sufficiently beautiful, so I had my tape recorder there. I said, can I make a tape? Because I'm going to India, and I'd like to have that with me. So I took it to India, and every time I would get sort of into certain states, I would play things like this guitar business. At that time, I did not realize, really, that the same guy was those 2 guys. Now, I came back to America, and about 2 weeks ago, I was talking with somebody about Sufism. And they said to me, this Sufi teacher said that Bach is very high, that he was one of the last Westerners that understood in the total plan the role of rhythm and structure. And he understood it so well, and when he spoke, it spoke to those places in a person, and it was like causal knowledge in nonverbal form. He was telling you how he was describing the universe at a plane that was not in the physical plane. He was just using sound, taking you out on sound. It's like mantra, same thing as mantra. It takes you to a certain place through rhythmic structure. And at that time, I remember thinking, gee, wouldn't it be a groove to try an exercise with Bach, because that will bring the whole Western business back into perspective and so on. And last Tuesday night here, after I was leaving, a fellow came up and he said, you remember sitting and talking one day? He said, I play the guitar. And that was the guy that played Bach. So he is here tonight. I said to him, why don't you play next Tuesday night with us? He said, I'd love to. He's a lover of Baba also. And I thought we would do this as a meditation exercise. Now, in order to do that, You can get caught in the sheer beauty of the structure you're going to hear, and you can stay as the enjoyer of the beauty. If you do that, you've blown the exercise. It's groovy, and enjoy it this lifetime, and, hear some more guitar, right? Or you can use this as an exercise. Just become one with the sound. Let it do it to you. Let the music do you instead of you listening to the music. Forget you're a listener and just be the music.